We're going to talk about social media, where it's come from, where it's going. I'm a television guy, and I was always taught that we lost the ability to understand how television was going to change the world. Television was the only mass medium we knew ahead of time was going to be a mass medium. And what I was taught that we should have done but didn't do is we should have tracked people before they had television. In the 90s, I became convinced that digital, first the web, now mobile, was going to be far more important than television. So 15 years ago, we started tracking people in digital. Watched people as they went from non-user to dial-up to broadband. We still track the 12% of Americans who were not online. And 15 years ago, when we started this work, it was obvious that how we communicate was going to change. That email was going to let us have friends all over the world. It was obvious how we buy was going to change everything. Amazon was already around. It was clear how we work was going to change everything. Back in 2000, 75% of those who use the internet at work said it made them more productive. 5% said it made them less productive. 20% said it didn't make any difference. But the things we didn't predict were, first, we couldn't have imagined 15 years ago when everybody connected to the internet with a PC on the desk and a hard wire to the wall, that within 10 years, almost all new users of the internet would be using a little phone in their hand. That was just not imaginable. And it also wasn't imaginable that a social network could reach 1.4 billion people. And that's where Facebook is today, at 1.4 billion out of 7 billion people on the planet. But it's actually much more impressive than 1.4 billion out of 7 billion, because 1.3 billion people on the planet, the Chinese, can't get Facebook. So Facebook's actually reaching 1.4 billion out of 5.6 billion. And it's even more impressive than that because there's only 3 billion people on the planet who have the internet, and Facebook's reaching half of them. We have never seen anything that has brought 1.4 billion people, and as the second 3 billion people on the earth go online, they will be connected as well. Now, we believe in the work we do that social networking, and let me ask, how many of you are on some form of social networking? And we'll get into which ones in a minute. We believe social networking is the real deal. It's going to be here forever, but we think that among young people, there's constantly going to be an evolution of which network they're on. Not among people over 40, we think they will stay put. But back in 2005, Rupert Murdoch bought MySpace. How many former MySpace users here? Well, about 5. Back in 2005, Rupert Murdoch bought MySpace for $580 million. And he bought it because he said it allowed him to reach the teenagers he could no longer reach through his newspapers, and who were even getting difficult to reach through his broadcast stations. About the same time that Rupert bought MySpace, we issued our 5th annual report. I mentioned that we started 15 years ago. So in 2005, we issued our 5th report. I was being interviewed when we released our 5th report, being asked all these questions about how the internet was changing the world. And then the last question was, what do you think about Murdoch buying MySpace? And I said I thought it was a great investment. That part of the quote has been lost forever. But that he would never be able to hang on to the teenage users of MySpace. And they got very angry when we said that. And they fought back not by saying, no, we will hang on to the teenagers. They fought back by saying, look how much money we're making. And they're absolutely right. Even though Murdoch paid $580 million for MySpace and sold it 3 years ago to a group of investors, including Justin Timberlake, for $35 million. It was a great investment. They signed a $900 million ad share dealing with Google when they bought it. They brilliantly marketed their Fox Films and television shows on MySpace, and they sold a lot of advertising. Rupert would have liked to have gotten more than he paid, but he did very well. But it turned out, and this is the heart of what we're going to talk about today, it turned out we were right. They weren't able to hang on to their teenage users. What I had said 10 years ago, and I wasn't trying to be viral, because if any of you ever try to be viral and say something, it just doesn't work. You can't plan being viral. Viral, it has to be authentic, and I've had the stupidest things I've said become viral, and things that I sort of thought were worthy of being viral that don't, so you can't game it. So I just say what I think, but what I said 10 years ago, but the press seemed to like it, explaining what was going to happen to MySpace, was that to a teenager, very different with AARP members, and we'll get there in a moment, to a teenager, an online community is like a nightclub. And when the nightclub becomes too popular, or the uncool kids start showing up at the nightclub, they're out of there. And as a teenager, what's the worst thing that could happen to you in a nightclub? Not literally the worst. Literally the worst is somebody with a bomb or a gun walks in. But to most teenagers, what's the worst thing that could happen to you in a nightclub? Your mother walks in. And now your mother wants to friend you on Facebook. How long are you going to hang around in a place with your cool friends where your mother's hanging around? I happen to believe, I'm not being silly, I happen to believe that almost all of life's issues can be answered through Seinfeld. If you're not a Seinfeld fan, just ignore this for 20 seconds. There's a wonderful old, they're all wonderful. It's a wonderful Seinfeld where George Costanza, his mother has just separated from his father, Frank. And she's explaining to her son that now she's a separate. And as a separate, she says, I'm out there. And George, who's single, says, I'm out there also. And if I ever ran into you out there, there isn't enough therapy on planet Earth to fix me. So we got it right on MySpace. 5 years ago, we released our 9th report, talking to some of the same reporters who said, okay, you got it right on MySpace. What's going to happen to Facebook? And we've been saying for 5.5 years, we think the same thing happens to Facebook, with two distinctions. One, when I said that Facebook was at 700 million users, it's at about 1.4. We think it'll grow for another 3, 4, 5, 6 years. It's not finished growing. And second, they hate it when I say this, but I don't think this is a terrible thing. We don't think Facebook ever dies. We think Facebook survives as the place you go to communicate with your mother and father, your brothers and sisters. Facebook becomes, and it has become, the phone directory to the planet. If you want to find anybody, unless you're looking for the Chinese, then you go to WeChat, which we'll talk about in a second. But Facebook is the phone directory to the planet. You want to find anybody, you go to Facebook. So we said this in 2009. Facebook said, no, it's not happening. We did a little bit of work 3 years ago, and we found among teenagers in America, Tumblr had become more popular than Facebook. If you're familiar with Tumblr, now owned by Yahoo, Tumblr spelled T-U-M-B-L-R, because on the internet you don't have to have vowels. If you did the same thing today among American teenagers, you would find Snapchat is more popular than Facebook. How many of you are familiar with Snapchat? Okay. Snapchat, for those who aren't, Snapchat started with a very specific mission. As you know, many of you are parents, some of you are grandparents, As you know, when we were kids, our mothers told us 3 or 4 things. My mother, and I'm sure all your mothers, said, look both ways before crossing. Don't ever get into a car with a stranger. Don't ever take candy from a stranger. Now, as a parent or grandparent, you got to tell your kids 8 more things, all of which have to do with the internet. Don't ever tell anybody who you are. Don't tell anybody where you are. If you ever meet anybody in person, do it in a public place. They're now saying if you ever buy anything from Craigslist, you should meet those people where? At a police station. So all these new things parents have to tell their kids. And one of the things parents have been telling their kids since Facebook became so popular is don't put anything on Facebook that you wouldn't want on the front page of the New York Times or the LA Times or the front page of your newspaper. Because the thing about Facebook, you have to be 13 to go on Facebook, although many people are younger than 13. And yet you have to be 18 years old in America to sign a contract. The argument is that you shouldn't be able to sign a contract till you're 18, is the argument you shouldn't be bound by something until you're mature enough to understand it. But in many cases, you can do far more damage to yourself by putting something on Facebook that never goes away than you can signing a contract. We're actually beginning to see for the first time spring break is becoming a very tame thing. All of a sudden, guys aren't walking around with cans of beer in their hand. Girls aren't yanking their tops off because they figured out that within 15 seconds, every smartphone is a camera and it's on Facebook. So that's why Snapchat was started. Snapchat was you send pictures to other people and they disappear in 10 seconds. Now, first thing you have to ask yourself is what kind of pictures are people sending that they want to disappear in 10 seconds? The other problem with that is they don't really disappear in 10 seconds. Teenagers, people who use Snapchat, have learned how to take screen captures when the Snapchat comes, so it only makes you think it's disappeared. So anyway, so Snapchat we find more popular today among teenagers, but the interesting thing is none of this is true for AARP members. They are much more, and not just AARP members, anyone over the age of 40, they are much more comfortable staying in Facebook. But we think there's going to be a constant evolution of which social networks people are in. What I had said a year and a half ago was Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, is going to have to open his checkbook every year to buy a new social network. Zuckerberg, as you know, turned down $1 billion from Yahoo, who wanted to buy Facebook. Turned out to be a very smart thing to do, considering that for his birthday last week, on the day of his birthday, the stock market went up so much that he made $1.2 billion just on his birthday. He's worth about $31 billion now. But Zuckerberg understands that Facebook, and they've now acknowledged, is losing its teenage audience. Keep in mind, Apple, the richest company on the face of the earth, is sitting on $160 billion in cash. They have never made an acquisition bigger than $1 billion till now. They bought Beats, the headphone and streaming service, for $3 billion. Whereas Zuckerberg, keep in mind, just in the last 3 years, spent $1 billion for Instagram, spent $2.1 billion for Oculus, virtual reality goggles. He tried to buy Snapchat from Evan Spiegel, who was 22 years old at the time, for $3.1 billion. Spiegel decided not to sell to Zuckerberg. He didn't want to work for Zuckerberg. Turned out to be a very smart decision because Snapchat's now valued at about $16 billion. And then he bought WhatsApp for $19 billion. How many of you have ever used WhatsApp? A great little application, a messaging application, but in its DNA accepts no advertising and charges people $1 a year, a really silly investment. So what we're seeing is this constant evolution. Zuckerberg understands that it's Facebook to Instagram to Snapchat. There's a new website out, which I put in the description. Actually, not a new website, a new social network, Yik Yak, which is very, very, to an adult, disturbing. Yik Yak guarantees complete anonymity and lets you say anything you want to say. You're not subject to slander or libel laws. The people who run Yik Yak, it's an interesting comparison. They compare it to a bathroom wall. And they say, we are the bathroom wall of the internet. And if you think about a bathroom wall, you can say anything you want on a bathroom wall. There's nobody who comes along, regulates, tells you that that's acceptable, not acceptable. So, although the difference is, of course, bathroom walls reach tens of people, social networks can reach millions of people. So we're seeing this constant evolution of social networking. We think Facebook will always be in the background of social networks because it has accumulated too many users to disappear and die. But we think when you look at the hottest social networks being used by teenagers, they will constantly evolve.